Picture a stretch of river at dawn. A woman is crouched at the water's edge, rinsing something, half asleep, thinking about absolutely nothing. Then the surface breaks a few feet away and there's an otter looking straight at her, and it does the strangest thing. It pushes something toward her with its nose. She leans in, half expecting a fish, and instead it's a pup, limp, waterlogged, one leg twisted at an angle it shouldn't be. And the mother doesn't bolt. She hangs there in the shallows, watching, waiting, as if this particular two-legged creature at this particular bend in the river might be able to do something she cannot. It sounds like a one-off, a cute story someone made up, except it isn't. This precise thing, wild animals delivering their most fragile, most irreplaceable offspring directly into human hands, keeps happening. Different species, different continents, encounters that have nothing to do with each other, and the same basic event over and over. And the moment you actually stop and ask why, the easy answer, they just like us, falls apart almost immediately, and something far stranger takes its place. Let's start with the question that should be bothering you already. Why would any wild creature do this? Every animal out there is running on software written by millions of years of predators, competition, and near misses. Fear is the whole point. Suspicion is the survival strategy. And we are, by a wide margin, the most dangerous thing that has ever walked the planet. We've spent the last 10,000 years hunting, fencing, relocating, and quietly reshaping nearly every animal we've ever encountered. By any honest evolutionary accounting, a wild animal should regard a human being the way you'd regard someone knocking on your door at 3 in the morning holding a hatchet. And yet, again and again, across creatures that share almost no biology with each other, the response isn't panic. It's the opposite. It's trust, offered at the exact moment trust costs the most. So this isn't going to be one clean explanation. It's a pile of overlapping ones, and by the time we're done, you may find yourself looking at your own pets a little sideways. Take cats, because if you've ever lived near one that wasn't strictly yours, you may have already been on the receiving end of this without clocking what it meant. Feral colonies and outdoor cats have a long track record of hauling kittens, sometimes injured, sometimes just brand new and blind, straight to particular people. Not people in general, chosen people. The one who keeps a bowl on the step, the one who, months ago, gently freed a stray from a tangle of garden netting and has apparently been marked for life. Because now there's a rotating cast of kittens materializing on the porch like a delivery service nobody subscribed to. Cats are quietly building a ledger the entire time you know them, sorting the humans around them into categories, tracking who's steady and who's loud, who feeds and who chases. Cross a certain threshold of trust and you stop being a potential danger in the cat's mental filing system and become something closer to a member of the extended household. And once you're in that category, you get access to the kittens, not because the cat has decided you're enchanted, but because you passed a slow, silent, months-long evaluation you didn't even know you were sitting. Now it gets stranger because that same sequence, watch, judge, trust, then hand over the young, shows up in animals that never came anywhere near a human's couch. Dolphins and whales have a surprisingly deep history of drifting up to boats, specifically when there's a calf in trouble. And what unsettles people who witness it is how intentional it looks. These aren't frantic accidents. There are accounts of a mother maneuvering an injured or tangled calf right up against the hull, then simply holding station as if she's handing over a patient and stepping back to let the specialist work. Researchers who study cetaceans tend to point at the sheer social complexity of these animals. Pods already run on cooperative care, shared babysitting, coordinated rescue when one of their own is in danger. If your brain already contains the concept of that one needs help, and that one over there can provide it, it apparently isn't a huge stretch to occasionally aim that logic across the species line, especially toward a creature that's been floating past in slow, loud, obviously harmless vessels for generations. And there's a subtle piece nobody mentions. Our boats are noisy, sure, but our behavior around a visibly suffering animal is weirdly consistent. We slow down. We lower our voices. Our hands go careful. Animals are exceptional readers of body language, and a species that reliably meets vulnerability with gentleness instead of teeth eventually gets reclassified. We're everywhere, and we're loud, but we're also one of the very few creatures on Earth that regularly stops what it's doing to help a baby animal that isn't ours. Word of that somehow gets around. Birds deserve their own moment here because they're badly underrated in this conversation. There are solid accounts of wild birds, magpies, crows, even some raptors, steering injured or stranded chicks toward specific people who'd previously shown some caretaking streak. Crows, especially. And crows are frankly a little terrifying in the memory department. They can hold onto individual human faces for years. They appear to nurse grudges against people who've wronged them and extend something that behaves a lot like devotion toward people who've helped. Get filed under one of the good ones by a crow, and that ruling seems to hold basically forever. And here's the eerie part, it can pass to the crow's own young, who somehow arrive already knowing which humans are safe before they've ever interacted with them, which opens up a genuinely wild possibility. That some of this baby delivering isn't just one animal's personal trust, it's inherited trust, socially transmitted, a fledgling absorbing this human is fine, the same way a kid absorbs which neighbors are the nice ones without a single word being spoken about it. Then there's domestication, which is the big lever because it didn't just change how animals look. It rewrote how certain species process trust and reliance at the root. Dogs are the obvious case, and honestly the sweetest one. A mother dog who trusts her person will routinely carry her newborns over and set them down at that person's feet, one at a time, like she's completing a task. That's not a random impulse. 15,000 years or so of living alongside us, built around shared work, shared food, shared defense, has left humans permanently slotted into dog psychology under something like pack member, but with hands. And pack members get the puppies. That's not a quirk of the relationship, that's the relationship. And that wiring seems to leak. There are documented cases of wild wolves, coyotes, even foxes behaving with strangely low fear toward particular humans in places with a long history of quiet coexistence, feeding stations, minimal hunting pressure, generation after generation of encounters where nothing bad happened. It isn't domestication in the technical sense. It's a cousin of it. A slow, soft familiarity that occasionally coughs up behavior you'd swear belonged to a house pet. Elephants might be the most gutting entry on the whole list, and I say that knowing I've been narrating most of this with a grin. Their memory is legendary, and their social bonds run across generations. There are numerous accounts of herds walking up to specific people, rangers, conservationists, sanctuary staff, with a hurt or orphaned calf in a manner that reads unmistakably as a request. Mothers who present the calf then withdraw a few steps and wait, sometimes for hours, plainly expecting the humans to do something. What makes it land so hard is that elephants seem to remember particular individuals who helped them or their family years earlier, sometimes for the rest of their lives. There are stories of elephants recognizing a former keeper after 10 years apart and reacting with something that looks a lot like real recognition. If an animal can carry a warm memory of one specific human across a decade, it stops being surprising that the same animal would eventually decide that human is the safe bet when a calf is in trouble. By now, you've probably spotted the shape of it. Almost every example here involves an animal with unusual memory, serious social intelligence, and some history, even a secondhand one, of low conflict contact with people. This isn't random, it's more like a slow assembling trust algorithm. Built one interaction at a time, generation over generation, memory stacked on memory. But there's a less heartwarming layer, and it's worth being honest about instead of only telling the cozy version. Sometimes handing a baby to a human isn't a considered act of faith. Sometimes it's flat desperation. A mother cornered by a predator or facing a flooding den or nursing an injury she cannot possibly fix may just gravitate toward the nearest large, slow, non-predatory shape available, and that shape, awkwardly, is frequently us. We're big and clumsy and we smell like wood smoke and soap and whatever we ate 2 hours ago, none of which reads as I'm going to eat your child the way an actual predator's scent does. When the options collapse to nothing, choose the human isn't always trust. Sometimes it's just the least terrible thing left. And yet, even that still means something. Even desperation-based trust requires the animal's brain to run a risk assessment and rank us above every other option in a crisis. That approach the human keeps winning out over do anything else at all, given our track record, is genuinely remarkable. Somewhere along the line, across a staggering range of unrelated species, we got quietly encoded as a viable emergency fallback. That is not nothing. Scent threads through all of this more than people realize. Humans give off a very particular chemical signature, some blend of sweat and soap and food and whatever detergent was on sale that year. Animals with strong scent memory, which is most mammals, can catalog individual human scent profiles the same way they'd log a familiar member of their own group. Once your specific smell gets tagged as safe and predictable, that tag can persist for an astonishingly long stretch, which helps explain why some of these deliveries happen with animals that have crossed paths with the person only a handful of times. Here's a piece that ties a surprising knot. Humans are strangely, almost suspiciously good at reading distress from species we've never encountered. There's research suggesting that the pitch and rhythm and urgency of distress calls across many mammals share enough underlying structure that we respond to them instinctively, even one we've never heard. A wailing human infant and a yelping puppy set off remarkably similar reactions in us. The quickened pulse, the snap of attention, the pull to go see and help. Some researchers suspect our sensitivity to helplessness isn't tightly locked to our own species. It might be a broader, slightly leaky caregiving reflex that keeps firing for the young of other creatures too. And if animals have gradually clocked across generations that humans meet distress with help rather than aggression, then that reputation becomes an asset worth cashing in, even across the species barrier. Which may be the most important thread of all. We are one of very few species that repeatedly, voluntarily intervenes on behalf of young that aren't ours and aren't even our kind. To most predators, another animal's helpless baby is simply a meal. Humans, for all our genuinely ugly history with the natural world, have somehow accumulated a fairly consistent reputation across a spread of unrelated animals as the ones who tend to pick help over harm when a baby's in trouble. Built messily, inconsistently, across countless small encounters, that reputation appears to be a big part of what's driving this whole phenomenon. Primates bring it uncomfortably close to home. There are documented cases of wild and semi-wild chimpanzees, bonobos, and various monkeys carrying injured or orphaned infants toward familiar human researchers. Which tracks, once you remember how much of their social cognition mirrors ours. Primates already practice what scientists call alloparenting, where an infant is raised not just by its mother but by a wider circle of trusted individuals, aunts, older siblings, sometimes unrelated adults who've earned it. Extending that same logic to a patient, unthreatening human who's been around for years isn't a big leap. Spend enough time behaving calmly and predictably near a troop and you can apparently get absorbed into their mental roster of acceptable adults around infants, which is an oddly specific club to be admitted to, but achievable with enough patience and a strict no sudden movements policy. There's an actual line of research here, sometimes called the safe haven hypothesis, and beneath the dry academic name sits a genuinely fascinating idea. The proposal is that across a number of separately evolved social species, individual animals can form something resembling an attachment relationship with specific humans. Not identical to the bond between a child and a caregiver, but structurally similar. Animals in that kind of bond don't merely tolerate the human. They actively move toward them under stress the same way a frightened toddler runs toward a parent rather than sprinting off in a random direction. And once you've got that lens, an animal bringing its endangered baby toward one particular person stops looking bizarre. It looks like exactly what any creature does when it heads for its safe place. Notice too that this tends to cluster around actual emergencies rather than casual hanging out. Animals don't generally deliver their babies to humans to socialize. They do it when something is visibly, urgently wrong, an injury, an entanglement, a wound that needs cleaning, a calf that can't breathe right. And that's telling because it means these animals aren't just comfortable with us in a vague sense. They're making what looks a lot like a triage call. They've hit a problem beyond their own ability to solve, identified something in their environment that has previously solved that exact kind of problem, and routed the problem there. That's not blind faith. That's closer to outsourcing to a specialist, which is a startlingly sophisticated move for a creature whose every instinct otherwise screams, keep everything strange as far from my baby as possible. And it's crucial to be clear that this trust is neither universal nor unconditional. Populations that have been hunted hard, persecuted, squeezed into conflict with people show none of this. The baby delivering pattern appears almost exclusively where there's a long history of peaceful coexistence, or a specific string of good individual encounters, or a species smart enough to judge humans one at a time instead of writing off the whole species. Which means the animals aren't extending trust to humanity in the abstract. They're trusting you, specifically. The one who put out food. The one who moved slow and quiet last time. The one who didn't shriek and run when something wild turned up unexpectedly. There's a feedback loop buried in that. A human responds well to one crisis. The animal, or its whole social group, files it away. The next generation inherits a slightly lower baseline of fear toward humans, or toward that human in particular. And the cycle tightens, edging closer to exactly the behavior we've been circling this whole time. It isn't mystical, it isn't animals sensing our cosmic goodness. It's small, repeated, accumulated evidence stacking up case by case until a wild creature finally looks at a person and concludes, more or less, this one's probably fine, and hands over the baby. So, why do animals bring their babies to humans? Not because we've earned some blanket trust from the natural world. Our record is far too checkered for that. It's because across an enormous variety of species and situations, individual animals have been quietly assembling individual files on individual people. And enough of us apparently keep passing. Every careful approach to something hurt, every bowl left out for a stray, every gentle response to something frightened, drops a single data point into a ledger we never knew we were writing in. And now and then, when the stakes spike as high as they go, when a life is on the line and a frantic parent is scanning the landscape for any option that isn't certain death, that ledger gets called in and a human ends up cradling a kitten or a calf or a chick or limping otter pup, bewildered, wondering how on earth they became the chosen one. Turns out there was nothing random about it. We got chosen because somewhere along the way, in spite of everything, we earned it. And there's one final layer that almost never makes it into the telling, and it might be the quietest and most profound part of the whole thing. This works in both directions. Every case of an animal trusting a person enough to surrender its most vulnerable young tends to leave a mark on that person, and often on everyone around them. Rangers who've lived through it describe it as one of the defining moments of their working lives, a kind of proof that the slow, thankless labor of building trust with wild creatures actually registers on the other side. Conservation groups have started treating these encounters not as sweet anecdotes, but as real signals, indicators of how healthy an ecosystem is and how the local relationship between people and wildlife is holding up. A population willing to come toward humans in a crisis usually lives somewhere with less hunting, less habitat conflict, a longer history of sharing space rather than fighting over it. In an odd way, these deliveries function as a report card on how a given community has been treating the animals around it. Maybe that's the truest way to hold all of this. It was never really a story about animals being unexpectedly soft-hearted or magically fond of us. It's a story about consequences, about how every quiet, patient, unthreatening interaction accumulates into something that finally gets tested at the worst possible moment, when a parent is out of options and a small life hangs in the balance. And every time that test gets passed, it reinforces something fragile and hard-won, something that took generations to build and could be wrecked in a single careless afternoon. So, The next time you hear about a dolphin nudging a tangled calf toward a boat, or a stray parading her kittens up somebody's steps, or a herd of elephants standing patient beside a wounded calf, don't just tuck it away as a nice animal clip. Tuck it away as evidence that every so often, on a planet full of creatures with every reason to fear us, a few of them have decided we're worth the risk.